Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and one of my own games that isn't in a test ship or a preview or something of that nature. It feels quite good to just show off a regular tech tree ship for a change. So this is the tier 9 French cruiser, the Saint Louis, in a tier 10 game, but it's not bad matchmaking. It's also not quite fully upgraded yet, but in the last equipment slot I have the module that gives you a plus 16% gun range. So although I don't have the actual module, you know, that you grind for XP unlocked for the range upgrade, it's still got a very healthy 19.3 kilometers, which is more than enough to work with. So I've started off spawning down here in the south on, I can't remember what this map's called now. It was up on the screen only a couple of seconds ago, but never mind. I wasn't paying attention enough. It's this map, and generally speaking, if you spawn in the north, you want to go for A and B, and if you spawn in the south, not A and B, B and C. I can do numbers and letters, you know me, I'm so good at it. And if you spawn in the south, you want A and B, that way round. So what's happening instead is that we have quite a lot of the team going for the C cap, and that can work out, but you have to have not that many of the enemy there, because of course they have all the islands to use for cover, and your team approaching from open water doesn't so much. There's also a carrier in play, so that is going to potentially become important later on, maybe. We shall see, because of course a carrier can strike basically anywhere on the map. It might take them a little time to get there, but it's certainly going to make life more difficult for our destroyers. It also makes me quite glad I'm packing a defensive AA instead of a hydro, because the hydro is the safe choice, as it were. You don't know if you're always going to get a carrier in a game, but if there is a carrier, then suddenly the defensive becomes that much more useful. And those ships where you get access to both the defensive and a hydro, well, there's not many of them, but it means you're always going to be covered either way. In fact, I think it might just be the US light cruisers. I'm trying to think if there's any other line that consistently gets that. So at the moment I am just throwing some HE at this Montana. Unfortunately we lost our gearing to a rather predictable Fletcher drop. They just sat there in the smoke broadside. I mean, even sticking in the smoke but positioning better, or getting out of the smoke altogether, backing out around the corner would have been a good idea, but as it was, they made themselves a bit of a sitting target for that Fletcher to just drop torps in. They didn't particularly position themselves in a smart fashion. So we're down a destroyer already. I think we've lost a cruiser in the middle as well already. So that's not a great start, but at least they are also down a destroyer. They are steadily capping A, but this isn't looking too bad. I mean, we've only got a couple of ships here, but so have they. And it does seem like most of the enemy team is in the north, and it might even be enough to outnumber our ships. But even if they're exactly evenly matched in terms of numbers, like I said, it's not exactly the most advantageous position to try and get into that cap over open water, while the enemy has a bunch of island cover that they can use. So that Omri is actually in the cap at this point, and this is a prime use, a prime time to use the main battery reload booster. I probably could have switched to AP for the previous salvo. That would have been a glorious broadside shot, and as it is, he's starting to angle away a little bit, so that AP salvo isn't going to be nearly quite so good. That's still a 4k chunk. I'm already sat on nearly 41,000 damage, which is not bad overall. I am, however, acutely aware that there is a Shima nearby. Our Shima isn't doing so much to spot, although it would be a little hard with that Montana so close, to be fair, and also there's the carrier in play, so I can't really blame them for being at least a bit cautious. And at the moment I'm just trying to support this Kremlin and maybe spot this Shima if they were thinking of being a bit sneaky. And there's still the no, it's the Fletcher, not the Shima. It's I'm doing well this morning. Anyway, a destroyer with torpedoes. Yes. So the Fletcher pops up. I don't have my main battery reload booster back just yet, and he's also playing with his speed a bit. I figured he might be slowing down to stay in his smoke, so that last salvo overshot a bit, but he's also taking damage from the fighters, the rocket planes. He's being spotted by the rocket planes, so it'd be nice to be able to finish him off, but he's now at such low health that actually our Shima can comfortably do it with their own guns. I think they've smoked up at this point. The Omri's really backed off as well. The Montana is now quite low health. I'm going to do something a bit risky here. I mean, the Montana's already proved willing to shoot at me, and I am certainly the squashier target than an angled Kremlin. But yeah, nonetheless, I want to try and get my torpedoes in on the action, so I'm immediately going to turn away and hope that I don't get hit too badly, because I'm definitely, guessing he's going to try and shoot at me, and yes, my prediction is entirely correct. Also, if I'd just dropped those a smidge differently, I could have had 2 torp hits there instead of 3, but I wasn't trying to... I was trying to do it in as unrisky a way as possible, and I am kind of getting away with it. In fact, I dodged the rear guns entirely, which is quite nice, and even get the kill, so that's not too shabby. So that just leaves the Omri, who might be a bit of a problem, but they are very low health. That's a good ship to have taken out at this stage of the game. There we go, with the Kremlin getting the kill, because the Omri is a very dangerous ship. Just if they're allowed to stay alive, then because of their range, because of their ability to kite and lay fires at range, yeah, it becomes a very difficult ship to deal with in the late game. I also get noticed at this point, but I don't think I realised at the stage I was playing this game. This match is only a couple of days old, so yeah, I was a little intently focused on the fact that there was a Shima. Now this time I've gotten it right, coming round the corner, and kind of wishing I had Hydro at this point, but it doesn't look like they would have gotten the chance to lay down some torps. I'm not entirely sure what that enemy Shima was thinking. That was a bit of a suicidal move. I mean, I think their intent was to rush down the Kremlin, but there was no way they were going to make it. So while this little drama's been playing out, meanwhile the enemy team has taken B and C and has wiped out basically almost everything that went towards the C cap. I think we have 1 survivor in the form of that Richelieu. Otherwise we are very badly behind on points, and there are a fair few enemy, healthy ships left. So this isn't looking great right now. I do, however, have a fair chunk of my own hit points left intact. I've still got 3 heals, we've still got our own carrier in play, we still have that Shima, and the Kremlin's also looking fairly healthy as well. So I'm just going to use my ranged fire spitting abilities at this stage, and I'm playing it extra safe and using this island for cover. And this Alsace is absolutely getting hammered, so that's going to be a useful kill, because yeah, Alsace is quite a dangerous ship. The Monarch, maybe not quite so much, but they are full health, and they do still have to be dealt with. A salvo of Monarch AP into my broadside could still be very nasty for me, and although it's not a particularly efficient fire setting ship, you do still see people using HE with it quite a lot anyway, so they might set some fires on my battleship allies. And there we go, yes, they do look like they're using HE shells. And against an angled Richelieu and an angled Kremlin, I kind of can't blame them. It's not exactly got great AP performance. So I'm just going to do what they're trying to do to other people, continue with the HE fire, although it looks like we're going to lose our own Richelieu fairly soon to maybe the enemy carrier. And in fact, part of my reason for now moving out into the open is to get a bit closer to our allied battleships and hopefully put my AA to use. I'm not particularly specialised for AA, but it's still a tier 9 cruiser. I still have a defensive available, and even though it's a tier 10 carrier, I can still do something. Now, it's actually the Neptune that kills the Richelieu, so that's potentially that's a very dangerous ship, in fact, if they are able to use their smoke and use their rate of fire to their fullest potential. But they're also a very fragile ship, so if I get a chance to hit them with my AP shells, it could be rather effective. I guess we'll see. This Monarch, meanwhile, is getting the absolute ever-loving everything kicked out of them. I think the Kremlin hit them for a lot, and then it's the Shima's torps that actually finish them off. Although our Shima's currently getting radared, and that's making it possible for our for their Neptune and carrier to actually make some drops. And then, lo and behold, the enemy gearing, the surviving enemy destroyer, makes an appearance. And although this is AP, yeah, he's so low health that that was not really going to be an issue. I just had to land a shell or two, and that would be the kill. I'm not sure why they opened fire at that point. I think it was in an effort to try and finish off our Shima. But when you're so low health, that's an extremely risky maneuver, especially given they knew I was nearby. So the Kremlin goes ultra aggressive at this point. I mean, I guess they knew that the gearing, the major threat, was out of the question. But there's still the carrier, there's still the Neptune with torpedoes, although with the Salem tangling quite this closely with our Kremlin, I guess the Neptune would be reluctant to try and make a drop. But that does not deter the carrier at all. And at this stage, I'm just frantically trying to get as much damage done as I can to maybe save our Kremlin. Switching between the AP and the AHE. But the French AP, it's not... I mean, it's good enough, but you can see here, it's against any kind of angle, it's not really as effective. You kind of need the broadsides to work with. So I get the kill on the Salem, which is quite useful. That thing does have a nasty rate of fire with its 8-inch guns. It is basically a Des Moines, of course. And that leaves me, the Shima, who's on low health, and our carrier versus the enemy carrier. The Lenin, who we haven't actually seen for a long while. They were last spotted by the team that was pushing C. And this Neptune, and the Lenin is really the big question mark. You can now see this Neptune is not exactly healthy. They don't have a smoke available. Theirs has just run out. And so, although I don't quite have the reload booster just yet, it's about to come back. I'm actually popping a speed boost as well to increase my maneuverability, because there's also planes overhead. And so I feel fairly confident pushing out to try and finish off this Neptune. But I take a big hit from rocket planes in the process, and the Lenin is the question mark. It really is. We don't know where this Lenin is or what health they are on. We do, however, get some clue from the chat. If you're paying attention, you'll see that someone on the enemy team has requested that we report the Lenin for being a bit useless, because they've been basically chuntering along at a quarter speed and hugging the edge of the map. But even a completely useless player chuntering along at quarter speed and hugging the edge of the map with full hit points, you know, they're still dangerous, and the enemy carrier can, of course, do something about our Shima. Now, my idea here was that I would go for the cap. I mean, we've closed the distance in terms of points, but I would go for the remaining cap. The Shima would be able to drop on the Lenin, and hopefully I would draw the carrier to me. However, that doesn't quite work out, and our Shima just barely clings on from that audacious bomb attack with 10 hit points. They do fortunately, however, have a smoke available, but you can see here I was completely wildly overestimating because this Lenin is still going at most half speed. They're just absolutely crawling along. I have no idea what was going through this Lenin's mind, but because they are making no attempt to maneuver whatsoever, our Shima's torpedoes do find their mark, and that leaves them, hopefully, a relatively easy kill for our midway. And the Shima, damage-wise, has to be doing fairly decently at this point. So now I am at the cap, and my idea of distracting the enemy Audacious is going to come to fruition. But it's also going to turn into a moment of Jedi derp. Now, I initially had the idea that I would cap, or at least try and block the cap, but as it is, just because the Lenin's there and the Lenin's a threat and the Lenin could shoot me, I don't want to expose myself too much, so that limits my maneuvering options. But then of course there's the Audacious's planes in play, and I'm maneuvering at low speed. I know I'm going to take one of these, but then, oh no, Jedi, no, that's too much turning, that's too much maneuvering. Oh no, what did you do? Okay, so I take another one in the bow. Oops. And now that the Lenin is dead, I realise, no, there's no point actually capping. We have to kill this enemy Audacious. We are now ahead in points, but if the Audacious is left unchecked, I mean, I'm fairly low health, and the Shima is extremely low health, and oh yeah, I'm not going to avoid this one either. They could potentially kill us both, and that would possibly be enough points to tide them over to the end of the game, because we're now down to the last 2.5 minutes. So that's my last heal gone. I've got one reload boost left. I've got one speed boost left. If I just ignored the Lenin and gone more directly so I would come round the front of the Audacious, that obviously would have been a lot better in retrospect, and instead, with my concern over being possibly shot by the Lenin, which I now in retrospect know wasn't really a concern at all, has led me out of this more western passage instead, and that's giving the Audacious time to make more drops on me. It also means if I make a torpedo drop here, it's from behind and it's a lot easier to dodge. So I'm going to kick out, trying some AP here, but it's not really being that effective. So over to the HE shells. I'm now very low health, but this Audacious is also maybe running out of planes a little bit, but it's not going to take a lot to kill me. I do dodge that last drop, and of course this Audacious player is simultaneously trying to manage their planes and their movement, so hopefully they're a little bit distracted. But while I am doing all this, do you see those Shima torps coming in from the side? I'm getting some damage in here myself, but yeah, I'm pretty sure this Shima is playing with the 20-kilometer torps. They do seem not particularly fast, but in this case, you know, it doesn't really matter that much. It might be they're grinding through the Shima, or it might be they're playing them through choice, but because this Audacious sailed forwards, they gave the Shima a perfect chance to drop through that gap, and they got the kill, and thus ends the match. Oh, it was a bit of an exciting ride, this one, wasn't it? I mean, there we go, you can see at the end there, just over 150k. I think the Shima can't have been that far behind. 43 plane kills, 4 kills each. The Kremlin got 3, and there was only one other player on our team that had a kill. So most of our team just got absolutely hammered. But between the rest of us, between our carrier, the surviving Shima on 10 hit points, somehow we managed to make this a win. And I think a big part of that was that utterly useless enemy Lenin, who really, I mean, could have been so much more of a threat, but instead they were not a good, you know, despite their hit points, despite being alive at the end, they were not a good player, and they just threw away every advantage they had. And yet, despite that, they came remarkably close to winning anyway. Or rather, I should say that enemy Audacious did. They had to be feeling a little bit salty at the end of that one, because if the Lenin had just been even marginally competent, they could have won, and as it was, no. So I do feel a little bit sorry for the enemy Audacious player, but only a little bit. So hopefully you have enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.